Pardon? All right, turn them on.
Well, our attorney's supposed to be here today, so we'll just go on this line.
All right, boys and girls, turn them on. In compliance with the Open Public Meeting Act of 1975, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided. Please rise for the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I will call the roll. Jay Schatz is here. Barbara.
I'm here.
Carol York is excused. Carol Sick is here. George Ator is excused. He has a bit of food poisoning. George, I'm not, if you want to find out which restaurant he ate at, you'll have to ask him. George Werner. James Van Pelt is here. Robert Kraft is absent. And Council Representative Shane Meyer is here. All right, you have in front of you a copy of the Tuesday, September 12th Shade Tree Commission minutes.
Welcome.
A motion, any changes or additions and whatnot to the ordinance?
To the ordinance?
I mean, to the
Minute.
to the minutes
minutes.
of the September meeting. I'll entertain any changes.
I'll move it, Mr. Chairman.
George, you move?
Second.
I can second that. I
And
can second that.
And Barbara, move Barbara. All those in favor of approval?
Aye.
Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Basically, we have a guest with us today, a David Von Furhers. You want to come up to the microphone?
Just pass these out. Share some of these.
Would you do me a favor, pronounce the last name for me?
Fraunhofer.
Fraunheiser, okay.
Oh, this is a tree in your backyard, right?
Yeah, that's the tree in our backyard at 1210. And about 2 weeks ago, we had applied to remove that tree
Right.
on that.
And
our-
I think I denied it because it was I'm acting commissioner for that district. I says it's got some life left in it. Let's see what it looks like come spring, see if it buds out more.
I understand that, yes. And I would appreciate if you would reconsider that recommendation. I've got, so basically, those pictures are from this past weekend. You had
Okay.
seen a little bit earlier on that. And in springtime, Top Notch had actually been there to prune out the dead wood. And you can see there's significant dead wood now in the past
Well,
6 to 7 months.
Okay.
And I agree with you. It's not dead, but it is significantly dying on that.
It looks like half of it is in pretty bad shape.
Rough shape.
And then the other half's in very, well, decent shape. It's not dead. It actually has a lot of life to it. There's movement on the canopy and on the side there, while that with your picture, it looks like the left V of that branch
Yeah,
could be looked at, but the rest of the tree,
Pruning back to where you have some live limbs coming out on, yeah. You can probably,
even maybe to the fence line.
well, I'm seeing growth here, like if you cut back to where you actually have growth.
Yeah,
That's,
that-
you know,
that's reasonable. Yeah.
I poked a tree several times when I was there, and the cabrum is still okay in that tree.
okay.
And that's why I suggested, let's see what it looks like in the spring. This is looking scraggly now because the leaves are falling. It's October, you know, but it looks like heck now. But
Well, it looked rougher this summer on that. But just as an alternative, what we were hoping to do was replace that tree with 5 American hornbeams, or whatever quantity or whatever alternative species that you would suggest. That is the...
no, I don't want to take that. I don't want to take that decision away from you. You plant whatever tree you're comfortable with. You're going to have, you know, you're the person who has to live with the trees in his backyard. So we don't want to dictate the type of tree you put in.
Well, I'm willing to, I'm throwing myself on the mercy of the court, hoping
Yeah.
that we can remove that and replace it with more fruitful alternatives.
Okay.
Can I
Yeah.
make a comment?
Yeah.
I'm looking at this tree, and I see on the left side, it appears to be dead. There is nothing there, which would mean to me, if that gets all taken off, then on the right side would be top-heavy. In other words, when we have bad weather and trees don't have a equal each side.
Balance on
Balance,
the
thank
tree,
you. That could actually topple the tree. Now, that's only my thought from what I see here. I know because I've had that experience.
Yeah.
well, Barbara could say, so, I mean,
No, I've had a tree that,
yeah, no, I heard what you said, but you're saying no growth on the left
No
side. This-
growth.
This is growth right here. This is growth coming out here.
Barbara, I think, excuse me, I think you're
So there is
right,
growth
but
on that limb.
could the right side of the
But
tree
what's-
then
what-
be
what's all
trimmed in
this
such
right
that it
here?
wasn't so
Yes, so this should
top-heavy?
be pruned back to where you still have growth, right here. This limb should probably just come.
What, Carol has a point, what?
That limb should just come, because it's just the direction it took.
Barbara had said that the
What-
left
I'm sorry.
side was completely
I can't hear
dead,
you,
which
Carol.
does look like that. But the right side could be trimmed in such a way to balance the tree out, so it wouldn't have to be removed.
well, it could be trimmed,
That's what I mean, trimmed.
but it's still only going to be one side of a tree.
No, she's saying
But
the
if
other
it-
side as well.
But there is some growth on the left side. If you look at it, it's just getting blended in with the tree that's in the background.
Then trim
But
it
if you
all.
look closer at it, you'll see there is growth coming out of there. So that can just probably be pruned back to where you
Right.
do have growth.
And trim the other side to
And
balance.
trim the other side, get rid of the dead limbs up top, and try to get some shaping to it. Because obviously, no maintenance was ever done to the tree. You just let it grow wild.
What kind of tree is that? Do we know?
I think it's a, Tom Notch kind of indicated it was a George Washington cherry. But I really don't know.
I mean, in order to
But
save it.
it's cherry
prune
tree,
it.
it's a non-fruit bearing, right?
That's correct, non-fruit bearing.
I hate to see the old ones go.
Right, well, that's what we're here for, right now.
Well, another question. What is everything that is on this tree? Do you know what that is, Jay? What's all the stuff that's
blue
on this
ribbons?
tree?
We're
So
just trying to highlight what is dead.
Yeah, some of the, I put the blue ribbons on there, hoping to just highlight
Just to highlight what's
the
dead.
dead branches, and
Just mold.
the ones in the back are really encroaching on my neighbor's property.
The one limb that's hanging directly over your neighbor's fence, I mean,
that's
just the
common,
direction
right?
of that
That's
limb
the
should
north
probably
side
come
of the
down
tree.
anyhow, because if that gets any kind of snow load, ice load on it, it's probably only gonna break.
Okay,
Do that one again, Jim, I missed that.
This limb here, if it gets any kind of snow load or ice load in a bad storm, the direction that it took, it's probably only gonna break off anyhow.
Right.
And it is directly over his neighbor's property
Right.
into his fence.
Okay,
You're not losing
if
much
you,
by taking
if,
it. You probably actually help
if
with the
you would-
balance of the tree
Right.
by taking that out.
if you would rather not wait till the spring to see what that tree looks like, how about a discussion, or how about consideration of allowing the tree to be taken down for a $75 fee with the provision that 3 to 4 trees of your choice be put along the backyard perimeter? Would that be,
Yes,
would that be acceptable to you?
that's very acceptable, very fair.
Have any comments?
I'm in agreement.
Of what?
This falls
taking-
under, as of now, because nobody has District 7, this falls under you, other than being chairman, but it also is your district, technically, right?
Pardon?
This is your district as of now, because nobody actually officially is assigned to District 7. So you're taking
Well,
control.
that's my suggestion to resolve the situation.
Right.
Allow the tree to be taken down, because it's still a live tree, as far as I'm concerned,
Yeah.
for 75, with the provision that 3 to 4 trees be put in the back. And it's probably in the spring or something like that.
Jay, he's proposing 5, so if you're gonna say, if there's gonna be provision, let's go for the full 5.
Okay,
And that's
That's fair,
agreeable to you.
yeah, that's fair, yep, that's fair.
Well, someone needs to make a motion, and there needs to be a vote.
I can make a motion that we.
to approve that for 5, one down for
Yeah.
75, a deteriorating tree
It's not-
with 5 suitable trees be put in the back.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Motion will die without a second.
Yeah, I'm thinking it over. It's not the most sightly. These trees that you're talking about for replanting, even though we can't enforce upon you the tree selection, what is it that you're suggesting, and what type of height do these type trees grow to?
They're American hornbeams, and some of my friends have them on Maryland, 1311 Maryland, and they're probably 25, 30
Okay.
feet tall, that they kind of use them, they have them as a hedge,
Okay.
closely.
I just wanted to see if it grows into a sizable tree.
Are you
I
gonna,
didn't want to
would
see
you
something
plant,
that grows to a 10-foot height.
David, would you plant the trees along your fence line in the back?
Correct, they'd be along the fence line in the back, as shown there, yes.
All right, I'll second.
Yeah.
You got a second? All right,
Who seconded it?
right here.
Jim.
This is the opportunity for discussion before we go to a vote.
Yes?
So if anybody wants to have a discussion for or against,
I'm against taking this tree down. Why can't we just trim it?
Why
mean,
can't we
what-
what?
Why can't it just be trimmed? I mean, here's another case of a tree.
If you want a discussion about the tree is not looking very healthy.
No.
It needs a very severe trim, and more than likely, it's going to die. It's got mold on it.
Barbara, if you cut down every tree in Cape May.
You know something, you're
Yeah,
you're
it's-
100% correct about
That's
removing
moss.
trees, except for the fact that a lot of the trees in Cape May are getting old and they're getting destroyed. And people here, like David here, he's saying he's going to replace it with 5 trees, not just the one. And they're going to be there. We will have trees.
And you'll have this tree.
Well, we won't have that tree soon.
How do you know?
Because I'm looking at it. It's not a very attractive tree.
But Barbara, a lot of times those trees are not getting replanted, and maybe you would,
Oh, I will definitely.
but a lot of times that's not happening. Who's going to
Well,
enforce
I
that?
think we have to be fair to our homeowners here in Cape May that want to make their places continue to thrive and to look decent to all of our visitors who come here. That's most important, and that's the way I feel about it. If
That's-
this is a beautiful, wonderful, full tree, I say, no, you can't move it.
But
it's not.
Maybe it can be saved. And
What-
if it
what
can't
be-
be
What
saved,
benefit is that tree doing right now to the,
well, no, it
to the
hasn't
home?
been, it hasn't been taken
Or to
care
Cape
of.
May, for that matter?
Well, I mean, if it hasn't been taken care of, but if somebody trims it
No, you know what,
appropriately-
it's just a principle, I understand
this-
that. It's a principle that you don't want to take trees away, and I understand that, except for the fact that some of these trees need to be taken away because they're not thriving. And they're going to be replaced with new, healthy trees that will still be trees in Cape May.
Let's move it to a vote, Mr. Chairman, please.
it was suggested that
That's
you
my-
move to a
that's
vote,
my,
it's your
thought.
decision.
Okay, let's do this property also, this is a brand new house, right?
It's a replacement house.
Replacement.
There was a small cottage on it.
Right, and we allowed, obviously, because it was in the footprint, to removal of a large tree on the east side of the house.
Correct, a cedar tree.
Yeah, it was a cedar?
It was a cedar.
Yeah, but it would have been too close to the.
Yeah, it
to
was
the
growing
house.
out from the foundation.
And that was allowed to be taken down there because the house was considerably smaller than because you have a lot and a half, right?
No, we have a 66-foot lot. That lot to the left of us actually belongs to our neighbors.
Oh, to the other house?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. It's just a big open space there.
Just an open space.
Is that a building lot, do you know?
That is a buildable lot, yes.
Okay, so that tree probably would have been messed up anyhow. All right, I'm going
Okay,
to call a vote.
call.
All those in favor of $75 removal, tree with a provision that 5 hornbeam or equivalent be planted in the backyard, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Those not in favor?
No.
Hey,
1, okay.
and George, too.
All right. $75 make out to the city of Cape May. Okay, and I'll make sure that Nancy revises the rejection.
Okay,
Okay? All right.
thank you.
Now, can I just, before you get up, so I just want to mention that we're taking his word on good faith, that he will do these replantings.
Yes.
As of now, nothing in our ordinances read anything about a required replacement, correct?
Correct.
So if he doesn't hold up to his end of his bargain, I'm not saying you wouldn't, I'm not
Understood,
saying that
yep,
at all.
yep. Understood.
What do
Who
we do
enf-
as far as Shade Tree Commission?
Who enforces that?
Who enforces?
I have no idea.
I just wanted to make sure I got that point out just for discussion.
it's a good
That was all. So maybe that is something with the new
New
ordinance, we can
ordinance,
maybe
yeah.
incorporate.
It's
um,
required.
into the-
I'll put that, I'll write that in the
Agreement.
revised approval request, that it's a provision of 5 replacement trees be placed along the rear border.
Correct, yeah.
Okay?
As-
And again, I'm not saying you're not a man of your word.
Yeah.
Don't take me wrong.
Yep.
I'm just trying to bring that up in a public forum for the purpose of open discussion, mainly for us, for the board members.
Yeah.
To look forward, you know.
And maybe as a solution, you actually go back to that Basil Lynch, that you measure them before they're taken down, and if they're not replaced with comparable or promised trees, then basically you find the homeowners, like you guys.
Some type of a
are-
penalty, and that's not a bad
Just like you
suggestion
guys
for a
were
penalty,
talking
sure.
about out earlier.
There's a
Appreciate
level-
your suggestion, all right.
There's a level of trust here
Yeah,
between us and you and
I
you
will
and us.
replace them, I assure you.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay,
on that.
All right, thank you for coming in
thanks.
and stating your case.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to
Best of
keep
luck.
these.
Thank you.
Give these to Nancy.
Yeah, put that with the agreement.
All right, now, our main thing of discussion today is talk about the revised ordinances. There are a lot of questions that some of our members have concerning the ordinances. I've tried to go through these a couple of times, and there's a couple of things that I'm a little bit concerned with on just what it means. Executive Committee, Cape May.
Mr. Chairman,
Pardon?
Jay,
Can we introduce our
George, I want
I
guests?
think you might
Oh,
want to
our-
introduce our guests.
Yes, our guests.
They're going to be a part of that
Our
discussion.
city lawyer.
Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi.
Chris Gillen Schwartz, city solicitor, and I came here at the request of Councilman Meyer to hopefully talk about the ordinance.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
hello.
And your
Hi.
your colleague?
And this is my assistant, Carrie Freed. She's
What's
she's hopefully going to law school next year, so showing
What's,
her that
George, what's her name?
Harry.
Carrie Freed.
More important, where's the guitar?
It needs some entertainment.
Wrong
here,
venue.
don't we?
Yeah.
That's next week.
Yeah, come on
Yeah.
and sit.
Thanks,
Spell your-
thanks for coming, Chris.
Spell your name, hon.
It's Freed.
Hello.
C-A-R-Y, right?
C-A-R-R-I-E.
C-A-R,
R-I-E.
Oh, Karen.
Carrie.
Yeah, like Carrie Underwood. Carrie Bradshaw.
Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Carry my bags.
Okay,
Oof.
Maybe the wrong word, but yeah, you got it.
So, I put together a draft ordinance for you all to review, and before we presented it to the entirety of council, of course, the goal was to meet the needs of this board and hopefully provide a better review process for the applicants, and then a better process for you all to hear the applications in order to address some of the, I think, questions maybe members of the public have proposed, like where does the Shade Tree Commission's authority lie? Is it just in the right-of-way or the public property? And when I was the solicitor for West Cape May, I had the opportunity to address some of these concerns a few years back and reworked their Shade Tree Commission ordinance to avoid situations where applications and properties were falling through the cracks. So some people, there were certain applications that weren't getting captured by the board process. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You kind of indicated like you wanted to say something, but the goal was to point to the policy that West Cape May had in effect, which was you don't take out a tree as defined in that code without either going to the Shade Tree Commission on an individual basis or through the planning and zoning board process. So there's no escaping either process. There's only one process in West Cape May. You either get reviewed by the development board with the standards in there, or if you don't have to go to those boards for some reason, you have a by right application for the zoning board, you still have to make an application for tree removal to the Shade Tree Commission on an individual basis. And to give a specific example of why that was causing some confusion over there and wanted to eliminate it was, and I've seen this here, people will go to the HPC, they'll go through the whole rigmarole of the board process, and they'll say, hey, they approved the pool for this location, and there's a tree there. Well, they said it was good. Well, and I've said this at multiple council meetings in my 3 years being here, the approval process in the city of Cape May is a Venn diagram. It's not, you go to one and it trumps the others. Just like getting a DEP permit doesn't obviate the need to get local approval for whatever you're proposing. So congratulations on your HPC approval for the design of whatever you're proposing, but if there's a tree in the way and you want to remove it, we have another board for that, and that has to be reviewed here pursuant to standards that you all have and can update.
But with the HPC, that differs from zoning board, for example. Each application to the zoning board contains, as part of the approval package, a report by a district commissioner reviewing the status of the trees that exist on that site. And that's included as part of that zoning board package. Approval, when it's approved, then that recommendation is also accepted by the Shade Tree Commission. There is no such mechanism with the HPC, and as we know, if there's not a variance involved with the property and there's going to be construction there, zoning board doesn't see it.
Right.
So the HPC says, okay, you're approved, you have a clean site. And we've seen that happen, I know, on one particular occasion in town, where an old cedar and an old silver poplar went down. And after the fact, well, somebody should have said something, but correctly so, they had a permit, they were allowed to do it because HPC said, you have a clean site. So, one of our suggestions might be that, similar to zoning board, that the HPC approval package contain a recommendation by the Shade Tree Commission as to the status of that site.
Right, and I actually see that coming a step ahead in the process at the zoning official stage. Because regardless of whether you have to advance to the board, either be it zoning board or planning board, you first have to get to the point of the zoning officer for them to determine whether you have to go to the board at all. So what are you proposing to do? Well, I'm going to build a new house in the city of Cape May. Okay, well, does it involve the removal or proposed removal of any trees? If the answer is yes, then you're a part of this process. And a sidetrack from HPC or zoning. It's all, if those things are applicable, you have to meet all of them.
That'll work.
And that's something that we can, think, build into this and into the, you know, the process for review of these things to avoid confusion. Because I personally was involved in one of the appeals that you had, I think, last year on Broadway. And
Yes.
it was this application of, well, the HPC said we could do the pool here. And it's like, there's,
What did the HPC say?
well, it's just the argument from the applicant was, the HPC said we could
Put a pool
put
in.
a pool there.
Right.
And Jay, you were there, and that's all well and good. And pursuant to the HPC standards, which is not trees, it was fine. But that doesn't mean you sidestep this board. If it's applicable and there's removal, then you have to comply with that as well. So fortunately, we were able to come up with a resolution on that one, but.
So basically on that, if I remember correctly, we allowed removal of the tree. He protected the trees in the back with a barrier, and he agreed to put a line of trees along the driveway toward the beach, I mean, to the south.
Right, and that kind of dovetails into some of the procedural stuff that is in this new proposed ordinance.
Right.
To provide a better outline of the
So,
process.
so the HPC is going to, the Shade Tree Commission is still going to try to come down on the side of the tree and say, no, move your pool or don't put a pool in. And we're going to wind up in the same type of situation where we're going to have I call it a come to Jesus meeting, where we all have to sit down and talk about resolution of the thing. But the boards will approve a pool if there's space enough in the thing. There's happened to be a couple of trees in the way. They're going to say, okay, put the pool in, and the trees have to go.
Right, but, one of the things that the board can consider as part of the review of an application, if a zoning application is coming through, and it's, I want to build an addition to my house, but I need to take out 3 trees to do it, and the report from the Shade Tree Commission comes back, well, we're not in favor of this because, we think that's a valuable tree, that's a unique thing, and
Right.
the board can review that, and they can consider the feedback of, the impact on the natural resources.
I know I know the boards look at when we get a copy of the plans. Okay, I know, and we put our comments in about save this tree or save that tree. They do read that. They do take that into consideration.
It's part of the approval process.
Pardon?
Right.
They don't always agree with us, and that usually a tree comes down, but sometimes they do.
But, and.
I think we're willing to live with that type of
But
situation.
it also leads to potential negotiations. Can that particular site be changed? Can the plan be modified or amended? And that starts that conversation.
And the goal is to make sure that conversation is happening.
Yes, sir.
Each, no matter what the application, either here or through that review and comment process through the boards, because ultimately the board can take those comments, just like they do with the HPC, I'm sure you've seen that. And they say, one of their first questions, either planning or zoning board, is, well, what did the HPC think? And what did the Shade Tree Commission think of a particular application is another type of feedback that those boards can get, and they can push back on the applicant if it's not exactly meeting everything, and they say, well, can you change it or move it around? So with the goal being that conversation either happens at the board level or happens here on an individual basis if it doesn't have to go to one of those boards. And that's the framework that was confirmed over in West Cape May a few years back because of similar concerns that I think this board is experiencing.
Can I make a suggestion, though? It is fairness to the property owner, right? Anybody who's done any type of sizable construction project, be it an addition, new home, whatever it is, your first step is architectural drawings, which architects, as we know, don't come cheap. Revisions are additional costs. So you'll go through this full process where we're coming in late into the game to determine whether or not this addition, this pool can go in place.
I don't think we're coming in late into the game. We're
We
coming
are.
into the application process.
The goal is not for it to come in late.
Yeah,
That's
that's why you put it in the app, Jay.
But the only way we're going to get to that point is the architectural drawings are going to have to be proposed to either be it HPC, planning, zoning. It's going to go through those boards before it comes to us.
Let me put it another way. there's an old adage, but it's true and it's applicable here, is that ignorance of the law is not a defense. So-
Absolutely.
So
I
that-
agree.
But what we're trying to, but having said that, I think at least what we tried to do when I was in West Cape May was, okay, that may be the case, but let's get ahead of it with evangelizing to the public and the applicants that we have these layers of approvals and to plan for it before you're submitting your
So
first
that's, so
permit.
upon conceptual idea.
Right.
The homeowner has an idea. I think we should be called in at that point, before he even goes to address to the architect what he'd like to do. Because these are just, we're only dealing with trees at this point.
Right.
So if the homeowner were to say to us, we want to put a pool in this area, and we immediately go out there and say, well, no, we're not going to allow you to take those 2 trees down. He does not incorporate that now into his architectural drawings with then revisions and everything else down the line, which is going to cost him a pretty penny. It's going to cost him a lot of money.
And here it might be $75 to get a feel of whether that is viable or not, you know?
So my point is, can it be incorporated into the language of saying that before even going down the process of the submittals of your architecturals, can Shade Tree Commission be called out at that point in time, again, more based on conceptual, at least giving some fairness to the homeowner ahead of time to be able to say, well, the plan's not going to work, so obviously I'm not going to waste money on spending, for architectural drawings and everything that goes with the planning. If we tell them right off in the beginning that, no, this is not going to work because these trees are not coming down, at that point in time, they can speak to their architect and then come up with a second plan.
But how do you do that?
Right, exactly. How do you
I
do
mean,
that?
they're not gonna know that there's a tree situation until they start the official process. And unfortunately, they could have bought a property here and live in another
Well,
state,
why would
and
they?
their friend from another state's the one doing the architectural plans based on the property that he's
Yeah, but what I'm
seen
saying,
from
so,
100 miles away.
so then shame on them. I mean, so it's your property, so you come down and you say, well, I want to put my pool in this footprint right here, and you see 3 sizable trees there, right? So now, instead of having to spend all the money to have the pool drawn up where you wanted to locate it, then we come out further in the game to say, well, no, you can't put the pool there because there's 3 trees that can't come down there. If we can tell them ahead of time,
But
they don't
how,
have...
the question is, how do you do that? Because if they don't have a shade tree commission in their town, there's nothing that's gonna make them think that that's an issue before they address it.
I think, and that goes back, I think, to the initial intake phase, which I think the city has been trying to get proactive with corralling applicants at this point. We have an in-house city engineer at this point overlooking.
Part of your process.
Yeah, and I see an opportunity there for when people are coming into the construction office or zoning office and making the application, and they do their initial review, and it's like, okay, are you in the historic district? Are you non-contributing, contributing, yada, yada, boom, that's an issue. You may have to go check with them. You may not have to go to the board because you don't need any variance relief, but you still need HPC. Are you taking out any trees? Are you proposing any trees? Yes? Okay, well then,
I think the city does a pretty good job of
Yeah.
that.
And all of that language is already in there for the applicant.
yeah,
Yeah.
it can be, I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know if that's currently in the permit or intake process now, but it certainly could be, and that would.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you can, if it's already in, then that's settled. If it's not, is it possible to have that added?
Sure, and that makes a lot of sense because a lot of people, similar to the HPC, a lot of applicants will go to that board first before they go to the zoning or planning board because, one, the application process is cheaper and more streamlined. You don't have to do the 200-foot noticing and the publication before you go to the HPC. And in many cases, they can be harder, on the plan, and it goes through that grinder first, and it's cheaper and more efficient to go through that grinder
I think that's
first.
a very fair process, again, as long as the language is included in there that you have to consider shade trees on your property.
And the problem is, we can put all that out there, and there still may be some people
But if they
thinking.
ignore it, shame on them.
Yeah,
That's,
right.
again, that's, but at least the word was out there. You gave them, the opportunity to be able to consider that, maybe bring it forward at that time, maybe even call in the Shade Tree Commission and have somebody come out and say, what do you think would happen? At least we're
Right.
giving them opportunity, as long as they know, if it's in the language, that's fine.
Right.
And, but if it's missing, that's sort of unfair to the property owner.
Yes, several years ago, when Bill Lees was chairman, the city proposed and passed a change to the floor area ratio in the area east of Madison, east of Madison Avenue in what's called the Village Green area, allow them to build more house on the lot that was there. And that accelerated the tear down of the 1 and 1.5 and 2-story ranch houses that are there, and allowed them to build more house on the land. And it had a lot of existing arbor, had a lot of existing trees on their lot. And this is, we're seeing a lot of that now, as these houses are getting bigger and some of the mature vegetation is coming down because it's just too close to the house. And so that's happening in that area. Also, resolution with differences in the city manager. The board reports to, this board reports to the city manager. And I have no problem with that. It's the resolution of differences that I think should be addressed, and I don't think it's addressed adequately here. When we say one thing and the city manager says disagrees with us or agrees with the homeowner before the resolution usually is the city manager gets his way and the tree comes down. I'd like to make sure that we have another meeting of everybody. I know it takes time consuming, but I'd like to have a meeting then, the city council, you, the city attorney if necessary, representatives from the homeowner and his city manager, so we can all work out a reasonable solution. The last one, that is a tree on Benton Avenue, 919, I think it is Benton Avenue. We came up with it last meeting. We came up with an agreement with the homeowner. We thought that we would let the homeowner participate in the 50-50 program. And we would include his driveway apron, which was affected supposedly by a street tree causing water to run into his garage. Okay, so we went and said, well, you do the 50-50 program. When all the concrete is up, we'll look and probably allow removal of the large root that seems to be causing the problem, and we'll trim back the tree, and then we'll go 50% of not only the sidewalk repair, but also 50% of the apron repair for the driveway. That's how we walked out of the meeting. Sometime after that, it changed. The tree is now gone. And I took the 50-50 off the table. I said, since the program, the 50-50 program is to try to maintain the tree, now the tree is gone, we're not participating in the 50-50 anymore. So we'll see how that would.
Oh, this isn't the one I'm thinking.
So we'll see how that's going to work out.
So
That's the concept.
if I can address all of what you just said, I actually do think that this is addressed in the proposed ordinance, and I'll explain to you how I think I'd like to see that working.
That's 482, if anybody wants to look at that, if they have it in front of them.
What is the address?
482-7.
No, on him.
No, it's on here.
Oh,
The ordinance.
This is what he's addressing.
Let's do that
in
right
the
now.
conversation.
Yeah, so it's 482-7, and I'll tell you what I would like to see happen in every case where there's an appeal, Jay.
Yes.
What happened on that Broadway property, which was, it was the city manager and you and a representative of the Shade Tree Commission.
Yes, I was there as the chairman, and then we had the district commissioner there.
Right, and we had the chairman and the district commissioner, we had the applicant and their professionals on the board,
Yeah.
and we sat and basically held court and heard everybody out, gave the applicant an opportunity to speak, gave the Shade Tree an opportunity to speak, and then look first for, is there any light between the parties, and can we come up with a resolution that may allow that to go forward? And that may not be appropriate in every case, but at least evaluate alternatives and see if there's, and then is there a resolution that can also meet the purpose of
And that was fair, and I think everybody walked away from that reasonably happy.
Right, or reasonably unhappy.
Or reasonably unhappy,
That-
yeah.
That has not been happening
So
recently.
what this amends and provides is it clarifies and directs the
That's a fair path.
so that the process is a little bit more defined, and with the goal being that we have that discussion and hearing, so that it's sort of it's a combined mediation session, and if it can't be resolved, then at least all the information's been flushed out on the record, like we're sitting here at this table now. And then, you know, people speaking, giving their case, you're giving your concerns.
Right.
And then taking all that into account, ultimately, the final decision-making is the city managers in this case. It would be under this, it's under the current code, and it remains that way here. However, the decision, ultimately, if it comes down to the city manager calling a ball or a strike on this, the manager's decision has to take into consideration the purposes and standards set forth herein in the code. And so that's all the purposes for the shade tree ordinances. That's all the standards that you review these on. And the city manager can then affirm, modify, including any appropriate conditions, or reverse the initial decision if they find that, you know, this decision would follow the standards more closely. So it's not whatever a person feels on a given day. The person reviewing this has to, like a judge or like the zoning board, when they review HPC decisions, has to look at, okay, did they make a decision pursuant to the standards, and does that make sense? It's not completely, you know, whatever you're feeling on a given day. It has to, it's tied to the code sections. So I thought that was an important add-on here, and also outlining in section 482-7B, upon receipt of a request for hearing, the manager's office is going to set a date for hearing, taking into consideration the availability of everybody, so making sure that we have stakeholders present at that. And then the city manager will hear from the applicant, just like we did at that hearing when I was present, and hear from the Shade Tree Commission representatives. And, you know, there's pictures of it, there's a report from an arborist if they want to bring somebody, anything that's relevant to consideration of the Shade Tree Commission ordinance. And then let's see if we can come up with a resolution first.
And hopefully this doesn't come every time that a homeowner has a disagreement with the Shade Tree Commission. I mean, you know, we could have said to this gentleman, and be hard-nosed and said, let's wait till spring.
Well, right, and I
You know,
heard,
let's wait till spring to see what that tree looks like. So we try to accommodate people as much as we can, but try to come down on the side of the tree. And this is a pretty bedraggled-looking tree, but still, I would have liked to see what it looked like in the spring, but we'll go with our decision we made. We'll take it down. Is there, didn't see in here, is there still a charge for taking a tree down?
yeah, I mean, you have to make an application. Take it
Yes.
down. Yeah,
All right.
so.
Yes,
and-
it's in here, Jay.
It's still in there?
Yeah, it's the same.
75?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
May I make a comment? Just
Yeah.
just so everybody knows what I'm thinking. I think there's two sides to this. The ordinance is one side. You know, that's something that we need to start working on. And I think a lot of what everybody's been talking about so far is the other side, the application process, the information process, you know, the zoning officer's role in all of this. I think that's the other half that we also need to work out. But I just wanted you to know what I'm thinking, because right now we are speaking specifically about the ordinance, and I think it's good dialogue so far.
And this is nothing against the city manager or even the Public Works Commissioner role if the tree is severely damaged by wind, lightning, or whatever, it's starting to roll over, fall over, to do an emergency approval to take it down. This doesn't apply. It goes without saying that they can do that. So we're not going to hold up a tree that's in an emergency or precarious or a hazardous condition.
That's also.
Pardon?
That language is in here. It's in the
Okay,
ordinance.
that's important that stays in, because we don't want to hold things up. But we'd like to take a look at it and take a look at a tree, because a lot of times people think, the one on Ohio Avenue, it was determined that there was water in the center, a big old maple tree, and it enveloped the water meter and the water turnoff valve, and they determined the tree was a hazard. Well, that tree's been like that for at least 25 or 30 years. And water in the center of a tree doesn't mean anything. It doesn't contribute anything to rot. There's nothing in the tree that does anything anyhow. That's all useless wood on the inside of a tree. Everything happens on the outside of the tree, in the cambium, between the bark and the inside of the tree. All the water goes up, all the sugars and starches come down. Our proposal was to take the weight off the tree, trim the tree back 25%. That'll preserve the tree. And if you had any problem, I'm sure the people, if they had a water problem inside the house, rather than turn it off at the street, must be a valve someplace in the house to turn it off to isolate the house. Well, anyhow, the tree went down. The tree was taken down. Again, our proposal, which was, I thought, a reasonable and sensible proposal, was overruled by the city manager.
What does the commissioners feel about this language and the right to hearing?
Okay, I do have a comment about that, actually. So,
What page are you on?
right to hearing,
We're still on the right to hearing.
482-7A reads 10 days from commission's initial written decision. But at the same time, the secretary has 5 business days from the initial report. So let's just say, for argument's sake, if the secretary had waited the full 5 business days, is the clock ticking on those 10 days that that person has to be able to appeal? Because then that would significantly cut into their time.
Oh, so, well, it's going to, that clock on appeal is going to start running when the person receives the decision, the written decision. So
Right.
if 5 business days, within 5 business days, the Shade Tree Commission is going to issue a written decision, it could be 3 business days or 5 business days or
Right.
1 business day. But when they receive it, that's when the clock on appeal is going to start. for the
That's when
applicant.
their 10-day clock will start.
Correct. Whenever they receive
So
it.
they're not losing out on any time?
No,
matter what, they
no.
get the full
Yeah,
10 days.
whenever they receive it.
Okay.
And look, if it's 6 business days, it's going to be 10 from whenever they actually
Regardless,
receive
they
it.
still.
It'd be
get
10,
10.
if it's 6 business
Okay.
days, what?
I just didn't want it cutting into their time.
Right, and that's why it's whenever they receive the written decision. So even if the board has to take an additional
Okay.
day for some reason,
I
it's
just
not.
wanted to get clarification on the language.
Yep.
That's all. Okay.
And if I may, I just want to, because I did receive some of the email comments back, and a lot of this is fine and kind of confirmatory language, but
Yeah,
just,
Jim had a comment about the,
Let him finish what he was saying. Let me finish.
so a lot of these are, I see confirmatory language, like when we're talking about issuing authority, we're talking about the Shade Tree Commission. We can make those types of changes. But I did want to touch base and circle back to the appeal process and the reason why it's framed the way that it is here and why it's framed the way that it is in other communities. So in West Cape May, when they were redoing the ordinance, it was originally, there was a hearing before the full board, and there was no appellate procedure beyond that. Now, as a municipal attorney, I can tell you that that is kind of scary.
it's kind of what?
Scary,
Scary.
yes, because that means that the next stop, if somebody is aggrieved, is they go to court.
Yeah, which costs everybody a lot of money.
Yeah, and it can be a colossal waste of time, too, when you can grab a hold of things before they get out of hand, so.
And Counselor, even with the remedies, I'm looking at the the second paragraph of item B on 482.7, even when the city manager's determination will constitute a final decision, there are probably still, or correct me if I'm not right here, that the applicant can still take it into an appeal process in the court system.
So that's why it's framed that way is, when I say scary, I'm not scared to do that, that's what I do for a living, but it's scary.
No,
Scary from the point of view that we can really create an internal appeals process to capture issues before they balloon into a court case. And again, using the analogy of the zoning board reviewing HPC decisions, if that wasn't in place, that's a product of statute, but it's a good one to have because it creates that one more level before you get to court, and then it actually helps the courts make a decision because they get a record.
Good point.
So, and to answer your question directly, yes. So the reason to have that final decision and review process and make sure everybody's at a table and a written decision is issued and a record is made, is because that ultimately becomes, if somebody doesn't like what the manager came up with, that could be appealed to court. And my reading of that is it would be reviewed on an arbitrary and capricious standard, just like a zoning board or whatever decision. So that is all the more reason to have a little bit of a more formal process when it comes to reviewing those things, because that decision becomes what is appealed to court. So hearing out the parties, trying to come up with a resolution, and if you can't, you have to call a ball or a strike, and at least you have your reasons in a written decision in some manner, and then there's a record of it, and then someone like me can defend that. So that's why it's set up this way. And in this case, the alternative, which I discussed with Councilman Meyer, is this is a form of government. We have council and a manager that reports to council, and the city manager is the CEO. Well, we could put this before council as an alternative, but that didn't seem like the most attractive option here or the most efficient, because council doesn't want to get involved in Shade Tree Commission.
Doesn't that go against our form, kind of contrary to our form of government?
Yeah,
It does, yeah.
I think it's potentially in conflict with the Faulkner Act, although I wouldn't go on record saying, oh, you can't possibly do it.
And notice I didn't
but-
use the phrase Faulkner.
But, yeah, but it does make sense that you have a final decision maker, executive, it could be an arbitrator. We could appoint a neutral third party. But in this case, we have a city manager in this form of government. It makes sense to make them the decision maker. And this gives them some regulations or guidance on how it should be conducted and what they consider when they review these things. And it's, like I said, it's not just, whatever you're feeling on the particular day. The standards are in the code, and the evaluation of each decision should be through that lens. So,
I'd like to make a comment on all this discussion, because we're discussing the Shade Tree Commission, but basically an ordinance. And therefore, like for the HPC, we have ordinances that everybody, when they come to Cape May and they want to purchase a property, get to know what the HPC wants to have. That's almost like a legal, decision that they can't put in certain types of windows, they can't, there's all kinds of regulations. So as I'm listening to all of this, I'm saying, in a way, this situation with the ordinance should be very similar to that when people are dealing with the Shade Tree Commission and the ordinance, it should be similar to the HPC. In other words, you know what you're supposed to be able to do, and what you know legally, the HPC can forbid, I guess that's a good word, for you doing something to your home that you would be responsible for, that is like against the rules and the regulations of the ordinance.
and part of this is stating clearly what this does. And right now, our code, what you're doing right now is supported by the code, but I've had to answer this question over a handful of times
I'm
in
sure.
3 years. Can we regulate trees on private property?
No.
Well, no, the answer is yes.
Answer, absolutely yes.
The answer is yes. It's
Oh,
in the
okay.
Absolutely yes.
It's in the code,
That's what I was
and
wondering.
It's in what code?
it's in the city code.
City
It's
code.
in the
Yeah.
city code right now.
It's not front and center, it's in one of the lower sections, it's not in the middle, but my point is, a Shade Tree Commission can only regulate the public right-of-way pursuant to statute, but if a city determines, that
It's in their best interest.
to regulate all trees because of all the benefits that trees have, a town can do it. This town did it, West Cape May did it, but what my point is, to your point, I think there's a clearer, more straightforward way to say that, so that when people, they see it in the first section, it's like, yeah.
I think the city was conscious of a shade tree city designation nationally, and wanted to ensure that there was procedures that were in place to ensure that that designation stays there. They don't lose that designation by capricious cutting trees down at the whim of people.
Right. And we don't have the type of land to clear cut like other municipalities do.
No, we
so,
do not.
Right.
Can I ask how we enforce monetary penalties? Does it get to a point, if necessary, a lien would be placed on the property? Is that what happens?
Well, if there's a violation of this, the way to pursue that would be summons in municipal court. So I heard the discussion before, who enforces this. I see code enforcement as the logical next step. If somebody violates an approval, that's potentially them proceeding with tree cutting without approval from this board, which they're required to get, and that's a code violation. So there is the calculation in the statute about the size, the
Right,
using
correct.
pi or
Yep.
whatever the formula it is. That's why I went to law
So
school.
I'm saying if we get all the way to the point where the homeowner, property owner refuses to make payment, a lien would be placed, or what happens?
Not necessarily. If it's in the municipal court process, it's a fine that could be assessed against them and assesses the judgment. So when they go to sell that property, it could be, collected probably with interest at that point.
What was the question?
If we went to full length of penalty upon a property owner for taking down a tree without permission.
Okay.
But the property owner refuses to make payment, what is the next step in that process?
Well,
And
the
can it bring-
first thing for that type of a fine would be a municipal court.
He just
So it's
answered
out of our
my
hands anyhow, and it's in the city, in the municipal court system.
Yeah, and the reality is, if someone really is thumbing their nose at the city on this, there's daily fine assessments, there's the tree calculation, there's tools available, and they're not very attractive to somebody who's trying to get past it.
Understood.
And given the way that properties are down here, it'll change hands at some point.
You briefly mentioned arbiter, if it ever got to that point. How is an arbiter selected?
I was saying in lieu of having a neutral arbitrator
Right.
Appointed.
Yep.
That's why we have the city manager selected as the in-house arbiter, essentially.
He's the, that's what I, okay.
Not an arborist, not what I've,
Not,
No,
yeah,
arbiter,
not to be
the
confused with
arbiter.
arborist,
Yeah.
And
I don't know if
to
I would.
to that point, in West Cape May, they do have an in-house arborist that provides basically professional advice to the board. I don't think we have that here. We have a lot of experience.
I think some of us
We-
made a suggestion that we perhaps should look into that.
Yeah, and that's something that I think we can probably talk about, like, in terms of the budget, too, just to seeing what are the options there for that, but it is a.
We have an agreement with Mickey Riggins of Arbor Care Resources out of Atlantic County.
Okay.
And it's expensive, but we've used him for decisions on the health, or yes or no on a long-term viability of a tree, and kind of gone along with his recommendations. But we've usually paid for that.
Well, particularly for the appeal context, I think having the board and the Shade Tree Commission have the advice of an arborist going into an appeal, I think that makes a lot of sense, and that can be incorporated as part of the record. So I would recommend that.
Okay.
But again, that's a budgetary thing that the administration has to decide.
Well, that would come out of the Shade Tree budget, right?
Correct. It just has to be appropriate. I don't, if, I
You know,
don't,
you could have an appropriation
Sure.
that
Is
goes
there a way, if
over
on
above.
this 75 or X number of dollars to take a tree down, or the tree bank, when you take a tree down, because that's still in here, right? The tree bank?
Tree bank is,
Does that money go to a separate account that the Shade Tree is responsible for to use to buy or purchase new trees?
potentially.
What?
Potentially.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't think we have that type of thing set up.
No, it's the $75, if we charge $3,000 because somebody took illegally a tree down, that money goes to the city, and it disappears. I mean, not disappears, but
But it goes into the
it doesn't go into the Shade Tree budget.
Sure,
it
you
goes
know.
into the general fund, Chris.
that's my understanding, yeah.
And that's something that, if we're doing that type of thing, we'd like to be able to buy trees with that.
I have, okay.
My only concern with that is it's 100% possible to kind of build that into this. It leads to, the replacement obligation seems to be the most tied to the removal, and I could be wrong about that. But the exacting a fee in connection with removal, there has to be some more definition given to that before that's deployed, in my opinion, because how do we calculate the fee. Is it the fee for the penalty? You know, that's what my only concern with that is. I think it's a good concept in this grand scheme of things, but it requires some more detail. And I personally like the replacement obligation part of this because that's an objective standard that can be deployed in almost every case, and you decide whether and how much you want to require that. So I would lean towards the replacement obligation because ultimately you're removing removal.
You say replacement obligation, how does that work?
Well, that's the little
fee.
chart that's in there.
Right, that's
about
correct. So if they take a couple of trees down, they've got to replace them.
Correct. And
Now, on their property or someplace else?
well, that's, you know, I'm familiar with the concept too of like overcrowding a property too with too many trees. So that's ultimately up to the board's discretion to determine how. to
Where they
deploy
go.
it. Yeah, and
Case by case.
yeah, and that's why it's for you all to determine if, let's say they have another property and say, yeah, I can install 6 cedars over there, and that may be something that the board can take into consideration and becomes a condition of approval.
Okay.
Can that $75 fee be increased? I mean, in today's
Yes.
world, with everything going on, inflation and everything else, $75 isn't much money anymore.
I agree with you, absolutely.
Yes,
Our
it can.
concern that maybe that was a state number, or,
No. It's got to, we can't have unreasonable confiscatory fees, but if that fee has been the same since,
I can't see any problem with even
long
doubling
time.
that to 150.
no,
I just
and
don't see a problem.
and also, if you think about it too, if we're thinking about things like having an arborist potentially involved in some of the decision-making.
That might be
we
able
need
to fund
cover our
that.
fees for the Shade Tree Commission. I'll point this out too about the arborist thing. If there is a particular application that the Shade Tree Commission thinks that an arborist would be particularly helpful for, if there's a contested application, that type of request can be made through the city manager's office and the finance department, and if it's at a certain level, you know, can be approved, assuming funds are available, and they review it and approve it, and if it's something that requires council approval, you can reach out to me and we can consider having a resolution if it's necessary. And that's something you can review on a case-by-case basis too, is my point. Even if you don't have you know, an arborist on call. You know,
Right.
A
for-
retainer.
We can do that on a case-by-case basis, just requires a little communication.
Can I ask, just strictly out of, because I'm very new to this, so basically due to ignorance, Menier, who they're much more familiar with, other than being a licensed tree removal, is he also an arborist?
no.
He's not an
It's
arborist?
not.
Okay.
And this would happen if we were going to have an appeal process. I mean, this would be part of the appeal process, a consideration of having an arborist involved.
Right, because I think it's good feedback, because the board may have certain preconceived notions of it, and then you get a second opinion, and you think, oh, I didn't think of it that way, or something.
Right.
Or maybe it just reconfirms the way that you thought before.
Exactly.
In any event, it's good to have that before you go into the hearing, too.
I think it's always good to have an expert.
Sure.
I have a question for the commission. I was reluctant to hand some of the recommendations to our solicitor from these emails, because it came from one or more persons. I didn't know if the entire commission supported these recommendations. If these are recommendations that everybody can agree on, I think then that this is the opportunity to hand them over to the solicitor to incorporate it.
That sounds like a good
Well, I
idea.
think we've discussed some of these.
We discussed the first one at the last meeting,
uh,
but if we want to go over them real quick,
Is this the October 9th?
yes.
And like I said, Councilman Meyer, I already made, while we were sitting here with the first application, I made a couple of the kind of administrative changes in there.
Shane, if I can back us up a
Right.
minute, there was also a September 11th document
Yes.
that was given to the commission. Do you have that?
I have that as well.
Okay. And looking at the September 11th document, I mean, we've talked about the arborist, we've talked about the HPC, we've touched lightly on the tree bank. There was mention made of a closed session, I think, somewhere during this discussion. Code enforcement representation. One thing we haven't discussed is, should the commission be supported more strongly on a legal basis?
I think In the context of the city manager appeals, I think that that makes a lot of sense because it is a last stop before Superior Court. So, but that is also kind of an administrative call, I think. And I think in building this process and expanding on it, providing a little bit more guardrails on it, that is probably going to lead to better outcomes. Although I will, as long as I'm here, I'll make myself available as much or as little as the Shade Tree Commission needs.
I think that was just some of our concern
Okay.
existed there, the potential, we're in a pretty litigious society now.
Sure.
And just knowing that, and I like your phrase that there is a guardrail there, Counselor. So, I mean, I think on the September 11th document, I think we've covered that right now. Is everybody in agreement there?
Well, are we able to have closed sessions?
Yes, but pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act, it has to be, if you want to talk about
That's me.
contract negotiations,
Turned it down.
pursuant to, if you want to talk about.
I'm sorry, I missed it with the phone.
He's talking about the reason why we would have a closed session.
Okay.
Right. So everything that you do as a group when you have a quorum is going to be in the public with the microphones on, et cetera. But that doesn't prevent you individually from speaking to one another individually, but it can't be for purposes of subverting the Open Public Meetings Act, of course. But if you want to have a closed session as a unit, you would need to set forth the basis and what you're going to discuss. So if you wanted to perhaps, a contested appeal is coming up and you want to have advice from counsel as to how to proceed on that, or what are the issues and guardrails and advice, that's the type of thing that you could take a vote on and invite me in or whoever's available, and we could talk about and render in the context of legal advice.
What if there was an especially contentious issue, the issue the gentleman had today, that was resolved easily with a vote? But what if there was an issue that couldn't be resolved by a vote, or even if there was a tie vote? Would that constitute the ability to have a closed session to further that discussion out of the public eye?
If it's for purposes of obtaining legal advice, then yes. But ultimately, your deliberations on the application has to be in public.
Okay.
And there has to be a record of that.
Okay.
So, if you're struggling with a particular application, that can happen. That's kind of the nature of the beast. But, if you're worried about, well, are we going a little too far, or we're not going far enough, and what do you think, counselor? That's the type of thing that can be done in closed session, and I can provide feedback on that. But ultimately, your opinions and your deliberations have to occur in the microphones and in public. So,
Okay.
but the other thing is, another example is, if you wanted to hire an arborist or consider hiring an arborist, I mean, that's potentially something that might implicate contract negotiations or something like that, so you could potentially go into closed session about that, but I suspect that that's not really a big deal here. So, if it's about applications, 9 times out of 10, unless it's a legal question, you're going to want to go and do that in public.
Are we going to
Thanks,
entertain
Shane.
all these notes that were forwarded by Jerry and Carol? Are we
Carol York.
We can
going to
quickly.
entertain all these
Oh,
points?
3 of us.
Yeah, I don't even know, who is Jerry?
That's her husband, I assume. It's an email.
That's
Okay, oh, okay,
She-
Carl York's email.
okay,
Jim, she just typed this up on her computer.
right. So are we going to discuss this now, or?
We should, I guess.
Okay.
I can go through each one of these if you
Let-
want.
Let's do that.
I think that'd be best.
So, suggested edits for 481-1, borough, that's just a typo. from the
Yeah.
previous, So that's changed. First sentence, add within the municipality, city property and private property, changed, that's exactly what this is doing. 42-3, use of executive committee, and I don't, that's for purposes of notice if there is I think it's the emergency sections. Yeah, in the case of emergency, so that's, somebody has to take down an emergency take down a tree in an emergency scenario, they at least give notice to any one of these people, code enforcement, deputy code enforcement officer, or any member of the Cape May Shade Tree Commission. Before it said executive committee, because that's a feature over in West Cape May, but I think it makes sense to give it notice to any member or code enforcement, just to put
Yeah,
the city.
we don't have an executive
No, we
committee.
don't.
Right, so it just eliminate
But
that.
if there's a district commissioner and then the whole board, you know?
Yeah.
So,
So,
and then me, I guess, as the
Right.
chairman.
so I just put in any member. The idea is to get the,
To
Somebody on
clarify,
board.
So we have authority in that situation as
Emergency
an
situation?
emergency situation as a commissioner? We can go out there and we can make a determination?
Sure. I'd say we have in the past.
can. If-
Yes.
If we keep it the way that.
Okay.
If we would change it to the Shade Tree Commission, here's how it worked.
Okay.
They'll contact either the code enforcement officer or deputy code enforcement officer, you know, the idea of them being on duty, or any member of the Shade Tree Commission. The responding individual shall inspect the tree and determine if the tree is considered dangerous. The term dangerous is defined as in such a condition that the tree risks immediate or serious damage to person, property, or public safety.
Well, also any commissioner, but usually the district commissioner, but also, again, if the public works manager or the city manager determines that a tree is an imminent hazard or a threat to life or property, he can give
Right.
permission
My
to take the tree
question for
down.
that, Jay, is only, you know,
For
we're talking
emergencies.
total emergency, whoever it is, who is at the next level, can we make that decision right then and there? Because it might be something that is a matter of minutes.
Yes.
You have to make a decision.
Yes.
So as long as I know that we do have the authority to do that, I just wanted to be
Yes.
assured of that.
That's the way it will be reflected in the
Good.
current draft.
Sounds good?
And then inconsistent use of tree contractor, that's just changed as tree contractor, right? So the property owner or the tree contractor, just confirming the responsible parties. Issuing authority, yes, refers to the Shade Tree Commission, so that's been amended to reflect that. The last sentence about wood cutting and placement for fire use, we can just get rid of that. That's,
I see a purpose of that, because if, say, someone cuts their tree down in their backyard and they let it just hang there like a telephone pole for the rest of its days, I think it could be unsightly. I think it's an opportunity to clean up something and make it
Oh, you
neat.
definitely have to be removed, but do you want to leave the language in there of stacking the wood for firewood?
Well, that's the reason why you wouldn't want to remove your tree from your property.
I don't,
well,
I'm just trying to play devil's advocate.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think this was provided an option that, you know, instead of taking it away, you could stack it in a neat manner. I don't think we even need to regulate that. I mean, if it's unsightly or not maintained, it could be a property maintenance.
That seems to be in all the ordinances. I just don't understand. Because usually when you hire a tree service to take a tree down on private property, and when we hire a tree service or have a tree service to take a tree down on public property, he'll cut it into pieces or run it through a shredder and off it goes.
Right.
You know,
So, I mean, if you don't regulate it, I don't think it's creating some big thing. It's just leaving it up to the property owner to decide whether they want it shredded, taken, or chopped up so they can use it.
all right.
So the second part of that is reference to the tree bank, and there is a sort of mini definition in there, but as I indicated, it's not some process that's outlined somewhere. So, and my preference, my recommendation would be to focus more on the replacement obligation. So, I'm okay removing it, let me put it that way, but I don't make these decisions, so we want to get your comments first and then get those to council so they can make the final. Including Historic Preservation Commission in the approval chain, like I said, I think that starts with the zoning officer's initial intake of it and making sure that appears on a form somewhere or as part of the intake process. Are you proposing removal? And that's probably more on the administrative side, but I can have a conversation with the city engineer and zoning officer.
I think, Counselor, that was more designed to plug a hole within the process that, again, was allowing for a clear site without having Shade Tree Commission even being notified that there were trees that were going to be lost in the process.
Right, and there may be an opportunity here to, council recently adopted basically, I don't know what else to call it, but the Miranda rights for the construction individuals with all the various regulations and all the things that we have in place, which we're not required to do. Everybody's presumed to be on notice of that if it's passed via ordinance, but to get ahead of this, to provide a, sort of PSA to the people doing work in town. That's why I think the shade tree element, to the extent it's not outlined somewhere, can become a part of that.
Right.
And that's something I could talk to the city engineer
That's
about.
good.
So in other words, I agree with this comment, and capturing at the zoning officer stage before it gets to that HPC is catching it even earlier, I think.
As long as it gets caught within that process.
Right. With the idea of getting it as early as possible to address the earlier comment about.
Sure.
Things being done. So items G and H from the West Cape May ordinance, that is, in terms of the penalties, yeah, this is sort of the three strikes you're out rule for violators of the shade tree ordinance. So one of the concerns in the neighboring town was sort of frequent flyers, frequent cutters, and there being no ramifications for that. Now, the only viable way to do that is if there's adjudication of guilt. It can't just be,
Is there a what?
you have to be found guilty of
Admission of
violating
guilt.
the code, but this was a three strikes you're out, ordinance provision.
Okay.
Meaning that a license to operate would not be issued if, someone was a repeat violator.
Tree service companies, are not arborists per se, but tree service companies, are they licensed by the state? Do they have a state license?
Well, there's,
Not a grass cutting service or a landscaping company, but a tree service. Are they licensed by the state? I know that the city requires them to be permitted to operate in Cape May because they check liability insurance, workman's compensation insurance, and stuff like that.
that's built into this.
Pardon?
That's built into this code, is
Yes.
the state requirements for licensure for tree care services.
Okay.
So that, and the statutory language is already built into this code, including the exceptions.
Including what?
The exceptions.
Okay.
There's exceptions. I'll give you an example. Any employee of a municipality or county, while engaged in the actual performance of his duties as an employee, is not required to be a licensed tree care service provider. So in other words, if the city's doing work and sending a member of its public works out to do the work, he doesn't need to be licensed. It's the city telling him he has to do it, and for whatever reason. But that's one of the exceptions recognized at the state level, and that's incorporated into the code.
Okay.
So turning back to 480-2-9, the comments there's a three strikes policy, and there is the procedure for where do you take the appeal of a stop construction order issued by city code enforcement, because a stop work order can be issued if somebody violates this code, and that would be provided
Well,
expressly.
that's who we call if we see somebody cutting a tree down without a permit and stuff like this. We don't have the authority to go in and say, we can go and say, can we see your permit? And if they don't say, I don't need a permit, our fallback is to call code enforcement,
Right.
okay? Because they can come and issue a stop work.
Now, code enforcement, they are, Shane, they are Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 type?
Yes, and if it's an
So if
emergency,
it's
you can call
outside, we can
the,
call police?
you can call the police department.
We
They're
can call
under-
police.
They're under the umbrella of the police
So we can call police, okay.
On a weekend or a holiday,
I
right?
Okay.
I actually think I've seen those cars driving around on the weekends.
I've seen them on Saturdays.
So we've done that when people,
Address that complaint, I think.
yeah, that happened when people were cutting trees down on Mount Vernon Avenue because their houses were, their ocean views were being blocked by, and these were junk trees. These were volunteers that were coming up on the berm that was put up there several years ago. But they were cutting trees down. And we called the police. And the police came and gave them a stop work order. I measured the little 1-inch or 2-inch diameter trees and gave them a count. And they charged them $27 a basal inch based on those trees, on a fine for cutting those trees down. They were on the beach, on the berm at Mount
Right.
Vernon.
So in terms of appeal of the stop construction order, it says in there that it would go to the Westgate May Borough Zoning Board, but I would just direct this through the current appeal procedure through the city manager to just keep it consistent. So if you get a stop work order and you want to appeal that, well, you can take it through the appeal process that's lined out. We can have the kumbaya meeting, see if we can come up with a resolution of it or not, and then they can make a determination. And then that decision is potentially not necessarily Superior Court, but maybe the Construction Board of Appeals would be the way to appeal a stop work order. But at least we have this initial review procedure internally to keep a leash on the process before it gets out of our hands, which I think is a good thing for the board and for the city.
Absolutely.
Solid barriers. You wanted to bring up solid barriers?
Oh, okay, so if we're off this topic, then fine, yes, so I'll
Wait,
go on to
are we finished with this?
There's
I
another
just-
side
We
here.
have another whole side of this.
Yeah.
And I can,
Right.
I can
Of
keep going.
of the October 9th document.
I'm sorry.
So there's
I didn't
more to
mean to
go.
jump out of.
Yeah, there's more to go.
I just have a quick question. Who issues the stop work order then? Who would,
Code
The
enforcement.
code enforcement officer.
okay, so he's responsible for kind of driving around and checking on whether contractors are, say, not piling debris around trees and that kind of thing? I mean, does the code enforcement,
As it's currently worded, this would be the way that it's done. It would be through the code enforcement officer. And the reason for that is because it's not necessarily tied to a UCC construction permit thing. So this is more the city's specific policies to the protection of trees, which if it's falls outside of the UCC, then it's just another thing that the code enforcement officer would be looking into.
and the code enforcement officer would be at our meetings? I'm just missing that. Would they be reporting to us on different things that they've found?
Not necessarily, but those types of reports can be requested. The way that I see that happening in practice is similar to the HPC compliance officer. They don't go to the meetings, but when issues are reported, the HPC compliance officer will follow up, and they usually provide a report back to the chairman about what's going on with that.
So that would,
And then the chairman can report to the rest of the board. But that's up to the board how they want to kind of, but it makes sense to have a point of contact for the board.
I was just going to ask that with, the HPC has a designated individual that does that. I don't think, I could be wrong, Councilman, but I don't think the Shade Tree Commission has a designated individual within the code enforcement office.
You certainly could decide about that if you vote on it. And
Make a request to Councilman Meyer?
Sure. And, I mean, that's something that you all
think
could,
that's-
if this is adopted in substantially this form, you all could designate anyone of you among yourselves to say, I'll be the,
Liaison with code enforcement.
sure.
yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a key necessity here to uphold a lot of this that we're talking about.
And we can say something like, code enforcement officer will communicate with the designated liaison from the Shade Tree Commission for enforcement issues. And then that leaves it to the board to determine who that is. Okay. The next comment was 482-4, applicants do not pay the fee until the removal request is approved. It certainly can be written that way, but I think there's time and resources that go into reviewing applications, whether or not they're approved. So that's kind of a policy decision on how the fees to be applied. But it makes sense to me, like, when people go to the zoning board and they pay the escrow fees and application fees, they don't get them returned if it gets denied. It's just, that's what it costs to review these types of things. And it doesn't have to be to that level in terms of the size of the fees, but it makes sense to say, you know, this is the fee and.
What if we go along with what you were kind of saying? You know, say if the application fee was A and the approval fee to remove is B, you know, so the total would be 150. I'm just thinking outside of
Yeah,
what
I
you folks would
understand. I
like to
understand what
see.
you're saying. It makes good sense to me. I mean, you know, an initial fee for the, as you say, the review and processing, and then if approved, then an additional fee for the permit to remove.
Yeah, you have to pay a fee for the HPC. If you want to do something, you have to pay a $75 fee. just-
Right. Well, what Shane is saying, he's building
Right.
off what I had said earlier of just maybe like doubling the fee, but that's a good
Right.
way of doubling the fee, that
That's
at least
true.
you do collect some money up front for the application process, because there is work involved with
Right.
the
Right.
city hall and all. And then if approved, then the permit fee would go on top of that fee.
Right.
An
Yeah,
additional
that's a good,
75.
I agree with that.
Well, application and permit.
I like that. It makes sense to me.
Application and permit.
$75, is that too much to you folks, you think, for the application?
No,
No.
not at all.
I don't think
So you're
so.
saying, okay, it's double that then, if you have an application and
An approval.
an approval?
Application fee, flat application fee, and then there's a removal fee if it's approved.
That
Yes.
Okay.
sounds good.
What?
Okay, so instead of just doubling, let's say, the permit fee for a tree removal,
Right.
like a healthy tree.
Which is now $75.
So if we doubled it to 150, instead of just saying, well, now that we know that the fact that the applicant has to pay upfront, instead of collecting the full fee upfront, we would collect $75, which sort of covers the cost of review and everything by
Right.
city employees. And then if approved, then an additional $75 fee for the permit to remove the tree. So in total, it would be 150 for an approved tree. You'd still be on the hook for the 75 for the,
Okay.
you know, for the application process. That you're still on the hook for regardless.
And if we don't allow the removal of the tree,
The applicant forfeited $75
You still pay
for-
$75 for the application.
okay.
I see that as very fair.
There is some administrative
I
costs in
think it's getting a lot more
Absolutely.
complicated. I think
No,
it's
but-
getting a lot more complicated than it has to.
Well, not really, because.
No, we got to live with this, every
I know,
day.
but what is stated, though, also, in which I just went through the process myself not too long ago, is, you know, if you want to do anything through the zoning board, you know, a fee is collected at application.
Right.
If I'm turned down, I still lose my application
That's
fee.
right.
That is still lost. And it makes sense, because they have to spend time reviewing it.
That's
So there's
true.
administration
Right.
time
There
involved.
is cost involved.
That's fair.
And in today's world, $75 is not a lot of money.
Okay.
Cost of doing business.
It's not a lot of money. Go to
move
the
on.
grocery store, we all know.
So the next comment is just confirming that once the request comes in, the commissioners whose district the tree resides will visit and assess the condition of the tree before the hearing. Is that what we want to add? I wasn't seeking to change any of the current procedures that are in place, if that's the case.
No comment.
Frankly, I don't think that's necessary.
I don't know, we don't have to change it.
Okay, so it's not written that way now, so if we don't need to change it, we don't need to add that. There's a suggestion here, all requests are reviewed by the Shade Tree Commission at the monthly commission meeting. A list of approved requests should be given to code enforcement, assigned to the Shade Tree Commission. Going forward, the code enforcement officer tracks the progress of these requests.
That's important.
That goes to the liaison, the further involvement of the code enforcement officer.
That's why we need that person.
Once we have that in place, you mean?
Yes,
Once we have that, right.
yes.
So the board would like to see that language included to confirm that communication?
Yes.
Okay. Section E, removal permit expires after 1 year from issuing date. If action has not been completed within the year, the permit is no longer valid, and the applicant shall reapply for a new permit. Well, the question is whether you want to have an auto expiration with the requirement to reapply. or as it's currently worded, the permit shall be renewed, assuming there's no violations, subject to any other conditions as defined in section E below, and that's all the conditions that you can impose on the original. So, I think it actually makes some sense to put a leash on it. You know, if somebody comes to you and it makes a whole presentation, and then they don't take it out for a year, it's like, what happened?
And that's where we are now. That's the way it's worded as of now. It will expire after 1 year.
No, it says,
No, negative. It's
the permit
open-ended.
shall
It's
be,
open-ended.
shall be renewed unless there's a change in circumstances necessary. So we can change it to the suggested language, which I think makes a lot of sense.
I think you should close it.
Yeah.
Agree with that?
I mean, we all forget what happened a year ago sometimes anyway, so it's a good refresher for us.
Yes. Yeah.
So auto expire after a year if no action is taken, and then reapply.
Reapply,
Yes.
yes, sir.
I'll change
Just
that.
things can
Here's the-
change.
I'm sorry?
I said things can change.
Sure,
In a
sure.
year
Yep.
on the property.
Okay, so that addresses, code enforcement representation shall attend monthly shade tree commission. You know,
We discussed that.
yeah, so just, I can build in some language about keeping the lines of communication open between the liaison and the code enforcement officer. 42, this is about the city manager's appeal process. I think there's some disagreement here about what would constitute final decision. And the proposal here is, I think, to just say, have the board make its own determination, essentially have a rehearing on it. I think, and this can be framed any number of ways, but I think it makes sense to have a level beyond the Shade Tree Commission, with the Shade Tree Commission having a seat at the table, presenting its concerns, potentially with its own arborist, and then hearing the applicant as well, and then having someone else make that decision in the city. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Which would be the city manager.
In this case, yes. That would be my recommendation.
And we can live, I think we can live with
think
that,
that's
as long as we have a chance. We have, rather than have just somebody just go around the Shade Tree Commission and go to the city manager, and him just making a unilateral decision, you know, without another sit-down.
Well, that would be the goal, is let's
Yes.
get everybody in the room together
Yeah.
and see if those two can work it out first before I make the call.
Yeah, people
Not
aren't
me.
dumb. People aren't dumb. They know that all they have to do is just go around the Shade Tree Commission to the city manager.
Well, this would confirm a process.
This would create a process to eliminate that.
We wanted to discuss the barriers.
Okay, yeah, so that's 482.5, right?
I think Jim had a concern about what the unsightliness at a site of the solid plywood barriers.
Well, okay, so let me discuss my concerns with it being that it was my topic. So, the suggestion of using plywood for the TPZ, in a lot of ways is overkill, and also, some problems come with that. One of them is when you create a plywood barrier around something, you lose the visual of what might be behind that barrier. So here it is, one of the things we're trying to stop is construction materials and such winding up, leaning on the tree, possibly cutting off some water to the roots, whatever the case might be. If there's a plywood fence around it, visually driving past the property, we can't see it. Wind shear, as we all know down here, is a huge issue. You develop now a plywood fencing around that, you're gonna have to anchor your posts in. You're probably gonna have to cement them in just like you would with a fence. Even with that, it's still gonna create a lot of wind shear, and it still could come down in a storm. The unsightliness of a plywood barrier, not exactly the most attractive thing to look at. So typically what's used is basic fencing type construction of 2x4, a bottom and top rail with posts, and very little wind shear, very little chance that it's gonna move, and it won't create damage, God forbid it did come down. So, it allows the visual. I think it's not as unsightly as plywood, and
Yeah, something,
there's a-
there's like this red plastic fencing that they put up around construction
You know,
sites.
that's a good solution.
Yeah, I think that's a great solution.
It's a good solution.
It's basically like it'll
a mini post and rail.
Right.
That's
right.
all it is. And
Yeah,
it's a
nothing-
no-go
nothing
zone,
too
and it
fancy,
can be
but just
viewed very easily, anybody driving past or walking past the property can see what's going on. And it eliminates a lot of those other problems.
We've
too.
been having problems with, the construction barriers many times you'll see in the city.
Yeah, had we that-
Two posts, a plastic
No
sheet
plastic
put
bunting.
between it.
That doesn't work.
And it lasts a day and a half before it's down, and it's fair play on
The other
tree
thing about the
roots.
plastic bunting too, you talk about unsightly, that's very
Oh, it's,
unsightly.
they just
It's
float
ugly.
all around.
We could specifically put that in here, that plastic's not gonna do it.
Yeah,
Right.
It's
a
awful.
plastic
top and bottom
Had-
rail.
Had we that in place, the construction company working on 20 Patterson Avenue wouldn't have had the opportunity to drive construction material
Chairman, you're
between
right.
the
I
two
was thinking the same.
multi-trunk maple trees that were there and absolutely just destroy the root area of those two mature trees. So we had to allow them, for $75 a tree, we had to allow them to take the two trees down with the provision they plant something in there closer to the sidewalk. But I hated to lose those trees, but, they were not gonna, they were to die 2 years anyhow.
Okay, so, we wanna say post and rail fencing?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Post.
I guess
was
you
it
can put a
posted?
minimum height.
Rail, I think.
Typical
Post
handrail is
rail
42
fencing.
inches, you can put
Post
42
rail,
inches.
I have 4 feet in there.
Okay, 48 inches,
Same
yeah,
thing.
that's fine.
Usually, if it's possible, it's 1 foot per inch of diameter. 10-inch
that's
diameter
another
tree
subject I wanted
is
to
supposed to be
So,
10 feet out.
so now let's say it's a sizable tree, and it's somewhat close to a property line. Now, a 20-inch diameter tree, you're telling me that fencing, the perimeter fencing now would have to be how far in each direction?
20 feet, but you
20
you
feet.
can't get that far. So you
So
have to
you'd have
pop
a
about,
40-foot fence around this tree, possibly encroaching on neighbor's property, possibly encroaching onto sidewalk, how are you going to possibly, it just
well,
seems.
you don't run that fence into the neighbor's property. You're only concerned with the construction on the property that's under development. So you
Okay.
just have it on the one side, or 3 sides.
Okay, but even with that, you're not seeing that as you just said, so a 20-inch diameter tree, we're talking 20 feet.
Supposedly, yes.
Okay, so now, you have to be somewhat fair to the developer, the contractor who's working there too, that, 20 feet away from that tree, if it's a property that's only 45 feet wide, it's not giving him much else. Who knows what else it might
That's
obstruct.
correct. So you can neck it down to maybe 10 or 12 feet.
But then it has to be in the language. It can't just read, because it's right now, it's stating that it's based on, the diameter of the tree per inch by a multiple of 12. So we'd have to knock that down. Instead of by a multiple of 12, you'd have to knock it down to whatever it would be.
Or why not just have a not-to-exceed number?
Because these,
Well, you can make that determination at the site.
but,
Give
well,
approval
It has to
for
be in
less
the
than.
language.
then
less
you'd
than
have to
one.
add in there, or at the commissioner's discretion.
Yes.
You'd have to add
You can
something
add that
like
at the
that.
beginning, if that's helpful to the board, just to say, look, generally,
Yes.
that's what it says, generally, the area, the dimensions of the TPZ shall be calculated by multiplying the diameter of the tree by 12. But, we can say, but this, the TPC may be subject to further,
Or at the discretion of the commission?
Discretion of the commissioner.
yeah.
Yep, okay.
I just think if I was to read this as a developer, I'd be confused. I don't know why we can't just do a 6-foot diameter around the tree.
Just one standard
Or
size.
That's,
perimeter, excuse me,
that's a-
perimeter.
that I think is that obligation for protection of a tree is in this uniform building code of 1 inch, or 1 foot per inch of diameter. That's in the uniform building code. I
It's just-
didn't-
it could be
I didn't
very
make that up.
impractical.
I just didn't make that up. That's in the uniform building code.
I understand, Jay, but we're
nobody
in-
in
we're
the
not-
building code office would enforce it
But we are in a
because,
city area, and the properties are not that large sometimes. So, the frontage on a property, as I said, some of them are as small as 30 feet, 35 feet. Now you have a sizable tree there, and you're going to tell this person that they have to basically take up their entire space with this barricade. There's no more access into the property.
So if we say, we say generally, that's the rule. However, the dimensions of the TPZ shall be subject to the discretion of the Shade Tree Commission.
That
which,
works.
if
That
we do
works.
that, it allows.
That gives you some discretion.
Absolutely.
And it allows an applicant to come in and say exactly what you just said, the example, look, I only got 40 feet lot width, how am I gonna do that?
And then they can call you in on an appeal.
No, but then they can explain, like, look, I don't know that I can do that, and then I have to move this, and then it allows you to do what you are here to do, which is solve a problem and look at the
Yep.
unique circumstances.
And it still gives us the authority, if we want to enforce the initial language, that we can.
Sure.
That we can still say, listen, you still have to go with the multiple of 12, with the diameter of the tree, and that's what you're subject to.
Right.
And we can enforce that.
Right.
But then again, we can use discretion if necessary.
Yep.
That's, works. I mean, anybody have a problem with that?
That's a pretty important addition.
So what's going to happen now? We get
Wait.
finished with this. You're going to kind of redo this
Wait.
with some of the,
Jay?
No,
I
no,
think-
that's, no, I think you're getting to exactly what unfortunately, I have another city event I have to go to, which I have to run 3.5 blocks in 2 minutes.
You can get there.
But I think would you be willing to come back to the next Shade Tree Commission meeting? Would that be fair to everybody? With the-
take a
with the
look at
changes
this
that we have?
with the final presentation, and we can all be happy with it, and then we can go ahead and start the provisions to give it to city council.
Sure. What I'll do is, I'm gonna update the ordinance that you have with some of the discussion items today.
Right.
I'll get the board an updated draft, and then we'll plan on touching base at the next Shade Tree Commission meeting.
Yeah, which is going to be, what is it, November 14th.
Okay.
And then with a quorum, we'd be able to hopefully.
Hopefully,
vote on
we'll
that
have
and pass
George
it,
and
then it'll go on to the next step of
Carol,
the council.
York back, and we can all take a good look at it then and be happy with it.
Would-
Because like I said, we're going to have to live with this every day, so we have to be able to understand it and be in agreement with it, you know?
I have another question for the commission and our solicitor. Should we have somebody from code enforcement represented at this next meeting?
We can
somebody
ask-
You can call them in, Shane,
Do
you're
we
a
have
councilman.
somebody what?
Call 'em.
From the code enforcement, I'm asking if this, I'm the liaison, I'm asking, you are
I know.
telling me
Well,
what you want me to do.
We would love to have somebody from
Yes.
code
Shane, I
enforcement, obviously.
I think it'd be a good idea to let
that's a
them
good
know what's
idea.
coming down the road.
Okay.
Good idea.
I'll reach out to city manager about that, and then talk about.
Yeah, we just need somebody from, because we're going to give them we would, after, if this gets in and we submit this to be passed, we'll give a copy right away to code enforcement.
Sure.
Because they're the ones that are going to have to clutch this and understand it when they go out on these requests and stuff.
Right.
I'll talk to you, we'll talk.
Okay.
Any other recommendations for the next
Yeah,
meeting?
So much.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very, very much for coming back and for the work that you've done on this. We really appreciate it. Yeah,
You guys,
all right.
thank you.
Thank you. And thank you and all the
Oh, wait,
best
wait,
for your law school.
Any more ramble on Thursday nights or no?
It's nice to see somebody sitting on that side that's not angry at us.
Until the end of November. End of October.
All right.
Mike, back on.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Do we have anything else concerning the Shade Tree Commission?
Yes, sir.
Okay, are you guys set up to go to
Yes.
Yes.
Cherry Hill?
Yes.
For the Shade Tree Federation
Yes.
meeting? Are you going Thursday or Friday?
Thursday.
Take care.
Jim,
Yes.
Thursday or Friday?
I have to look, I can't remember, I'll be honest with you.
You what?
I'm
I
Thursday.
can't be honest, I gotta be honest, I don't remember.
Thank you,
because
Council.
we were gonna meet with friends that we knew in the area,
Okay.
but that didn't work out in the end.
Go ahead.
Turn them on.
Oh, yeah, we
I'll
have.
entertain a motion to
So moved.
adjourn. So moved by George W. Do I have a
I
second?
can second that.
Second by Barbara. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Now you can turn it off.